Want to talk about my story a little bit. So I think I know most of you in here, but my name is Jessica Trepagnier, and we got our first goats, I think in 2013. And Soph was very young, and she needed raw milk at the time for health reasons. And I just assumed that I could go and buy it, and thought, okay, I could find someone who had it. What is raw milk? Why do I need it? Where do I find it? And then all those questions led me down the road of, you can't buy it. Too bad, so sad, it's illegal in Louisiana, and figure something out. So I'm not the type to be like, okay, well, I guess I can't have it. So I started looking into buying a goat. And the only thing I ever really knew of goats is like a friend growing up, his mom had some like little tiny pygmies or Nigerians in her backyard. And so I thought they were cute, very dog-like, couldn't be hard, right? So I'll go get goats. Because for me, a cow seemed really, really big at that time and really intimidating. I had just started homesteading and knew nothing about cows. So I figured, okay, we'll go with goats. And so I got on Facebook, and back then it's when you could buy animals on Facebook, and it wasn't, illegal. You post it and get taken down. And I found the most ratty, pathetic ragamuffin goats. I mean, and at the time, I didn't actually know that they were, right? When you get into something, you're like, okay, this will do. You have no idea exactly how bad it is. And back then, it wasn't so popular. We didn't have all kinds of social media where people were sharing with us what to do, what not to do. Homesteading wasn't something that everyone was aspiring to do. And so it was very trial by fire. And so I was so excited. I went out and got these goats. And I was actually going to show you these pictures because you guys will laugh. The condition this goat was in. And her hair was curled up and fried, and I knew nothing of that. She was very thin. I knew she was thin. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll fix that real easy because I was always into rehabbing dogs and horses, and easy, right? I'm just going to interject right there. It is not easy to rehab goats. Don't do it. Don't think you can do it. Don't ruin your property with it, and we'll talk about that later as to why. But brought her home. Actually, I think it was a group of three or four, and one was in milk. And I either believe the milk stand came with her. We bought it additional with her, a wooden one, and I sat down, and thankfully, my neighbor at the time was from Mexico. So she's my best friend, and she grew up milking goats in Mexico with her grandparents. So she taught me how to milk, or I can't even imagine how long I would have sat there and continued to squeeze that teat and have the milk go right back up in the udder because no one told me how to pinch off the teat first and push it down. That's the common mistake that people make at first. But she was a pro. She was with me and taught me how to do it. And that goat, that raggedy old ragamuffin goat, is one that we still have to this day. We sold her several years ago to a friend, and they gave her back to us just about a year ago after all our life changes. So she is gonna, if you're on our Instagram, that's Dee Dee, and I was able to rehab her. It was a chore, but that is who Soph learned to milk on. That's who I learned to milk on. She'll spend her days at our place. So from there, we learned what to look for in a goat. We learned that every goat has a different flavor of milk. We learned what to feed the goat in order to increase the amount of milk that the goat will produce. There were so many things in the beginning that we were kind of failing at, but we were still getting milk, so it wasn't a big deal. Our fridge was overflowing, and for us, it was a great idea and a great alternative to a cow. So why don't we, if anyone is, did you bring any milk? No? Didn't see what charity one. Is anyone not interested in trying the milk? Okay, good. Everybody's gonna be brave and we'll try it. Fabulous. When she comes back and I see where she put the cups, then we'll go ahead and just start passing it around. I do have some basic things that we can go over. No, I'll do that later when we go over milking. I'll get this ready for her. And she might just go ahead and pour that while we're continuing to talk. So, buying a goat. Buying a goat, like I said, you don't want to get anything that you have to rehab. It's just not a good idea because there are so many things with goats that can determine long-term health. There can be genetic things. There are things that they can acquire along the way from maybe a dirty sale barn, or even accidentally at a healthy homestead because they brought in another animal that was carrying it. So CL is a disease that you would want to test for, and I cannot remember or pronounce what that actually stands for. But when I do the slideshow, I will have that out, and I'll have the links to where you can send the blood work. It is a blood test. You normally, if you want to do it yourself, you would draw out of the arteries in the neck. You would get the test tubes from your vet, and then you would just mail them in. CAE is another one that you definitely want to test for. That's something that will also affect the udders. They can get a hard udder, they can get arthritis in their joints, not good, and it's spread through the milk. So if you have one of these things, it's pretty detrimental on your homestead or on your farm because you can spread it to all your healthy animals as well. CL actually has pustules, and if they rupture, I've been told that it doesn't leave your property for like 7 years. If there's a rupture in one of those pustules, I've heard people will concrete over that spot just so that to make sure that it doesn't spread. It's that serious. So I would recommend never bringing something home unless you have done a blood test and you've seen paperwork, proof of the blood test, and they haven't been exposed to anyone else. And that's going to come with any responsible breeder. Now, that can be passed along with people who are new or unknowing. It's not malicious all the time that someone would try to sell you an unclean goat, but it's very common, especially in Louisiana. So find a good breeder, ask for paperwork, and another disease would be yonis, if you want to test for yonis. That's not a must, it's not as common as the other two, but it's definitely something that you could do. When you are buying a goat, you also obviously want to choose what breed you're going to go with. And the breeds in goats, I feel like, are drastically different. I've owned 3 different breeds, well now 4, but the majority of my goats were Nubians. If you're familiar with them, they're the long-eared goats. They're beautiful, dumb as a box of rocks, but they are beautiful and they are so sweet. And to me, they're like a cross between a dog and a cow, and they will follow you around. They're not the ones that are normally getting out or trying to jump over things. Once they're big, they're kind of too big for all of that. The Nigerians are the smaller ones that most people associate with like little goats, right? And they get out a lot, stereotypically. They will jump over things, they will push through fences, they're very mischievous and they're agile. So those are the ones that will jump from here to there, and you will wonder how on earth they got, on a roof or, out of the fence. I just acquired this year an Alpine. The Alpines are very smart. Like people like. The first day we had her and she was staring at me, it was actually a little unnerving because she was contemplating, like, how they talk about raptors with the dinosaur? That's how I felt with her. I was like, are you looking at my soul right now? But she's very intelligent, will open the building door, will call to us when she sees us coming or when she wants us to be coming in the morning to feed her. Very friendly, very, very sweet. And I think I've heard from other people that that's very stereotypical of Alpines, and they are very heavy producers. So I think at her peak, I haven't had her in her peak, but I was told she produces 2 gallons a day, whereas most of my Nubians at peak are about a gallon to 2, depending on if they were very heavy producers. But Alpines do not have as much cream as Nubians, nor as Nigerians. So Nigerians, the little ones, will have the highest cream content. They have very sweet milk. The Alpine milk I find to be sweet. We're later in lactation where she's not having a whole lot right now, so the taste does change. But I find that this is very sweet milk, especially right after she is milked. So this is the freshest we have on hand to bring in here today. I actually had one Nubian, we called her Sweetie because when we were milking her, it smelled like vanilla ice cream. And that's opposite of what you would stereotypically think, right, about a goat. People often ask me, like, does it taste like a goat? And I'm like, only if you buy it from the store. Because it's pasteurized and it's been sitting. So when goat milk sits and ages, the flavor does change. It's more like a goat cheese, or can be worse or offensive. It also changes based on the parasite load of the animal, or the health of the animal, or what they're eating, or the mineral intake. Sometimes flavor can just be off because a goat is missing a certain mineral. I was told that cobalt can be one of them. Copper is something that goats absolutely need. We'll talk about that when we talk about supplements. But all of those things affect the flavor. And everyone's gonna be different on what they like or what they can tolerate. I can't tolerate a goaty taste. Even though I like goat cheese, when the milk starts to turn, I'd rather not. You can still use that milk to make cheese, and you know it doesn't make the cheese, I feel like, taste any worse or any better. But it's just not in my preference what I want to drink at the moment. But a lot of cultures love that. You know, goat milk is the most popular milk around the world. Most cultures do not have cows. Goats are very accessible. They're easier to feed. If for the nomadic people, they move with them much easier. And that's why I think it's so funny in our country that when I first started posting pictures of milking a goat, people are like, what on earth are you doing? That you're milking a goat? Yeah. Okay, so another breed, sorry, is I'm gonna say this incorrectly, a Oberhassi? Can someone correct me? I always say that wrong. That might be it. Oh, thank you. We have cups. It is another, I believe, a Swiss breed, very high producing, lower cream content. And I think they have a stronger flavor. I've not owned one. I've actually not even interacted with one. So I can't really speak much to that breed. But if you go online and even just do a quick search of the different breeds, you can find one that'll probably suit you and your homestead and what your needs are as far as what you want to use the milk for, what is your setup like, what kind of personality are you looking for in a goat. Do you want them to be attached to your hip, or do you want them to be a little more standoffish? Oh, I didn't talk about Sonnen. So Dee Dee, the one I was telling you about, is a Sonnen. She's a little more standoffish. She's kind of witchy too. She's I'm getting nods from my friends up front. But she's the boss. She lets everyone know that she's the boss. She loves my daughter, and she's grown to love me. But she is very particular with who she likes, and not as sweet as the other breeds. But she's also the only Sonnen that I've ever interacted with. So if someone has a different experience, it might just be in particular to her. And sorry that I'm doubling back, but even with the milk, every goat within that breed is different. So just like I said with Sweetie, hers smelled like vanilla ice cream. Not all my Nubians were like that. I actually had one Nubian that I couldn't drink the milk because it tasted so terrible no matter what I did. So this also goes with breeding. You want to make sure that when you're buying a goat, you ask to taste the milk. If you're buying a dry goat, then there's nothing you can do about that. You'll see when she goes, when she starts to lactate. If you are new to this and you go to drink colostrum, just know that that is not what your milk is going to taste like a couple days after kidding. You can drink it, it has health benefits, but it is going to be different. It will get sweeter, it will get more white, it won't be yellow, don't be afraid. Another thing you want to look for when you are buying a goat is the udder and udder attachment and the teats. So if this goat is in milk, you'll be able to see how does it fill. Is it attached on the top? When we say udder attachment, does it look like a teardrop and it's just attached by one little piece, or does it have full attachment on top? Is she built nice and wide? Can she carry that udder without it sagging, dragging, or something wrong happening to it? Has her udder been damaged? Has she had mastitis? Does she have an uneven udder? Which, if you're not showing, that really doesn't matter. Does she have blown out teats, which means her teats may have been smaller, but because she wasn't milked properly, maybe they got larger. It's still okay. It's unsightly, but you can still milk her. Not a big deal. If you are dame raising, they call it, which means that you're going to leave the kids on the goat, you are going to get probably some uneven sizing with your teats and the udder, as opposed to if the babies are pulled and you're just hand milking on a tight schedule. That's when you're gonna have the least amount of damage there, and that's what people do when they're showing. Another thing is just overall conformation. You know, is there anything in their conformation that hinders them in walking, grazing, browsing? The placement of the udder, is it hard to get to her teats if you're milking from the front, the back, the side? Just look at all of those things. Put them on the milk stand. Have the people that you're buying them from put them on the milk stand. Sit, see if it feels right to you. When you are trying the teat out, you want to make sure that they have a good orifice in the bottom. because some is like just a needle hole, and you will be squeezing so hard, and just a little bit of milk will come out, your hand will cramp, it will take so much longer, as opposed to a goat that has a bigger orifice on the bottom, and it will just come out very easily, and it'll be much less work on your hands, and hopefully you won't develop carpal tunnel. Okay, so we talked about buying, testing, fencing. So obviously you're gonna look at how much land you have. Goats really don't need that much land because they are better off in our climate, even in a dry lot. I mean, I like to give my goats land to walk around, and they graze if they don't have browse, but they would much rather browse, meaning they're gonna eat up off the ground. If you have a tree line or wood, they will be much happier eating that and much healthier eating that, because goats are very susceptible to parasites. This is a rough climate for goats, and I've lived in both. Here it is a lot of maintenance. You're gonna have to do a lot of either pasture rotating and worming, whether it's herbs or chemical. And it's gonna be different in everybody's situation. If your goats are grazing and they're grazing short to the ground, okay, parasites are in the bottom 4 inches of grass. So even though it might be unsightly, keep your grass tall. Let them eat off the top. Don't let it go down to the bottom. In really hot, wet times where parasites are high, it's common practice for people to just put them on what they call a dry lot. So a small, either a round pen, they'll kill the grass in it, put sand in it, whatever they have to do to make sure that the goats are not ingesting parasites. And this goes for dew also. I know people that will not let their goats out of their barn until the dew is dry during the day, just to ensure that they are not ingesting life-threatening parasites. Barber pole is a big one here for that. So maintenance is going to be your choice how you want to do that. There are different ways to do it that make it easier or harder. It's also going to depend on whether you are wanting to run your herd holistically or conventionally with chemicals and things. And in our state, you're probably going to end up with a hybrid of that, even if you intend to go out holistically. You will have to be extremely attentive. I'm not going to say it can't be done, but you will have to be extremely attentive, and you will have to have a dry property. So at my last property, we were in Carencro, and it was the highest point actually in Carencro. Never had an issue. Had 2 goats there, never an issue, and I used just herbal warmers and oils. Now at the property we're at, we have sheep and goats, and it is very low. And when we've had these really wet summers, I have to be extremely careful to watch everybody check their FAMACHA, which is pulling their eyelid down and looking at the color of the inside of the lid. And they have a whole scale online of what color and what it means. They should be cherry red. I don't know in Louisiana if we ever get cherry red, because they are always trying to fight something else. But we want to keep it as close to possible, close to red as possible, with whatever means. You do not want to just keep hitting them with chemical weapons. It's going to hurt them. It's going to cause parasite resistance, and it's not going to do them any good in the long run. So I find that when I'm using herbal warmers, it's boosting their immune system while it's also deterring the parasites and causing the goat to expel them. And then if we get in a situation and chemical warmer has to be used, then I'm not against it. I don't prefer it, but I'm not going to let my goat die or suffer because of the climate that I have her in. And I think it goes to, that point of we would love to do things in a way that's completely organic and completely natural. But in animal husbandry, if we have confined an animal to a spot where they can't be moving and breathing constantly, then I think it's our responsibility also to make sure that they are okay by whatever means necessary. Then I got off on a tangent because we were supposed to be talking about fencing. But I was talking about your property, high or low, what it looks like, if you are going to have large pastures, small areas of dry lot, if you have a barn, if you just have a lean-to, all of that is sufficient as long as they can get out of the weather and they are sufficiently detained, because they will continue to try to look for browse. They will want to keep moving, and because that's honestly what's healthiest for them. but the fencing, there's different types. Wood, obviously you can do a split rail fence, that's not gonna hold a Nigerian. So this is gonna depend on what breed you decide to go with. That's gonna hold my Nubians because they can't crawl through there. I prefer like a woven wire, some people call it a hog wire, on the inside of wood or with T-posts, because it's thick. Even they're gonna stand on it, they're going to rub on it. Goats are notorious for rubbing their sides up against the fencing. So if you do something that is thin or chintzy like a garden wire or a chicken wire, they're just gonna bust it. They're gonna push right through it, and you're going to, have to redo everything. Chain link works too. If you were in a neighborhood or even somewhere where you just have a little yard part fence in with chain link, it works. They will rub on it. So when I had chain link, we went on the inside with insulators and a hot wire, just to keep them a little bit off the fence, so they weren't able to go ahead and bend and warp our entire fence or stand up on it and cause it to sag. Because that's not just a like, hey, I wonder if my goat's gonna do that. All goats are gonna do that. So protect your fence. Make sure you have a game plan. I would say before you bring the animal home. I'm notorious for doing it the opposite, and it is a giant pain in the butt. Okay? Don't be me. So browsing and grazing, feed. Goats, I have found that they are really high maintenance when it comes to feed, to keep weight on. It's not as easy as having a dairy cow. And that probably has to do with the parasite loads here as well. When we had our goats up in Pennsylvania, they were fat. They were fat on that northern grass that is high in protein, high in sugars. Only had to use some herbal wormers, not an issue. But here, I feel like we have to really pump in protein because our southern grasses are lacking in that. No matter what we're planting, it's going to be less than the northern grasses. So alfalfa is, I would say, necessary if you are milking a goat, especially if she's a big producer, because it's just gonna drain her, she's gonna go downhill, her weight's gonna drop. But you will notice that the more alfalfa you feed, the more milk you're gonna get. So whether you use a loose leaf, which you can, but depending on your feeder, and with all goats, they like to make a mess with their hay. And it's a joke because alfalfa is expensive, and then they will pull it, and the minute it touches the ground, they will not touch it. They will not touch it, they will walk on it, they will lay on it, they will pee on it, but they will not touch it the minute it touches the ground. And that's really a good survival thing because of the parasites and how easily they pick them up and are susceptible to them. So I prefer pellet. If you have a good feeder, they have hay feeders with trays underneath them that will catch. That is a good option as well, but you'll find a lot of them use that catch tray as a stool, and they will just put their front legs on it and stand on it for whatever reason, whether they need to reach something or not. So I do prefer the pellet. I find a lot less waste, but you will want to feed a regular grass hay, whether it's Bermuda or Bahia, whatever your goat will eat. Some of them can be quite the divas. Just like the dairy cows, they're going to eat differently than they're going to, than the meat breeds are going to eat. You're also going to want to feed a dairy ration. So they have Atlas. I think some of you are familiar with Atlas. They have a dairy blend over there. It works. I like it. I don't prefer the coffee seed in it. So I have been shipping in a non-GMO, and it's not labeled organic, but they use organic practices. I've been shipping that in from Georgia, and if anyone needs information on that, I can probably get that to you. And they do their own blend. It isn't a pellet as opposed to a free grain mixture, but it's been working really well for us. So we do that. We do the alfalfa, and then we do some whole oats, and that has been really helpful and working well for us. So regular hay, alfalfa in whatever form. You can even use the chopped alfalfa that comes in the bag, and that will probably be a lot less messy than just the loose bales. Tractor Supply sells the compressed bales. I think it'll flake everywhere. And I used to use, I love it. I haven't gotten back into it since I got back into goats, but chaff hay, is anyone familiar with that? It's a fermented alfalfa. And it comes compressed, it's chopped up and it's fermented. It comes in a compressed plastic bag. And the company is in Texas, and we we used to organize big shipments of it. All the animals can eat it. We might actually bring some in for our pigs and things this winter, because it's great. I mean, we ferment our foods, right? And if their alfalfa is fermented, it really just helps them digest it, break it down. It's very good for them, and we have a lot of success with it. So I don't know of any store that's selling it here, but I feel like it may have been Thibodeau's that brought it in years ago. I'd have to check on that. My husband used to go pick that up somewhere. But because it was so scarce, we would bring in these bulk shipments, and anyone who wanted it, we would just meet at a location and get it off the truck. So that might be something that we could do in the future if anyone's interested. Let's see. Okay, so worming. We talked a little bit about worming. I prefer to use an herb blend called Molly's Herbals. It's Fiasco Farm makes it. You order it online. And I have it on the way, another herbal blend, it's an acronym, maybe KD. I'll put that in the slideshow for you with the links. And I'll let you know how I like that one. I haven't used it yet, so I can't really speak to it. But between the Molly's Herbals and essential oils, that's pretty much what I use to worm. But like I said, with the hard rain, I've been doing at least one chemical wormer during those hard rains, just to make sure things don't get out of hand and you don't lose any goats. So you're gonna use your same wormers that you do for your cows, basically your ivermectin. Prohibit is a really strong one. It's about the last one that we have that is great on barber poles. The barber poles haven't developed a resistance to it yet in this area, but for that reason, I don't wanna use it unless I absolutely have to. Because after that, there's basically nothing left. And really, if you have an animal that is already carrying parasites that are resistant to either cydectin or valdazen, that's probably gonna be a problem, for your homestead. So that could be another question that you ask when you're looking to buy your goat. What have you been worming them with? How often have you had to do it? They may have even done fecal counts, which is collecting fecal matter, putting it under a microscope, and seeing how many eggs are actually on that slide, and they can do an estimate there as to what the content of the goat is. Because some goats carry parasites very well, just like sheep and other animals, and some can have the exact same load and look terrible. Some are called super shedders because they're fine and you would never know, but they are sloughing off and shedding a ton, and the others are ingesting them. So that's next level parasite control. I don't have a microscope, I have friends that do. But if you are checking Famacha and you are staying up with a herbal wormer, pasture rotating, keeping their food off the ground, you should be good. Copper. So I mentioned that these goats need copper. So you can use a pre-mixed mineral blend that has all their minerals. A lot of the feeds have it in there also. But it's good to keep those little black trays in one compartment, keep a loose mineral that they can just go and free feed off of, and then the other you can actually keep baking soda, and that helps them prevention for bloat. They'll go and lick on that whenever they need it, and they never go and overdo it. It's just something that they know they need. They'll take a little bit of it and move on. So copper, we go ahead and copper bolus them once or twice a year depending on the goat and if they need it. So a bolus is just like a giant pill, and it's literally full of copper. Now, whereas copper will kill sheep, it's absolutely necessary for goats. So if I see a goat and their hair is just fried, they're not doing well, they're not thriving, the first thing I'm gonna do is worm. The second thing I'm gonna do is give them a copper bolus. And I'll put the links to that in the email as well. Okay, so if you are getting goats for milking, okay, they're good for meat too, but if you're getting them for milking, you're obviously going to have to breed the goat in order to get the milk. Now, the goat I have is on her second year of lactation. Some of these big producers don't have to be bred every year. If they are fed and kept healthy, they can keep producing for quite some time. But normally, people will dry them off intentionally around, the summertime, let them recoup, and then start to breed in July through September in our area, because you want those babies to be born in January or February. And that sounds kind of counterproductive because you're probably thinking, like, those are the cold months. Why would I want a baby born in those cold months? Well, because there are less parasites and and that baby's gonna have a better chance of growing and being healthy with less parasites in the environment, whether that's worms or coccidia. Goat babies are very susceptible to coccidia. Once goats are grown, they're fine. They don't normally have issues unless they are in an extremely filthy environment. I have found that you can raise babies here without doing coccidia prevention, which deals with antibiotics and things and medicated feed. You can do it, but they don't thrive really unless they are dry lotted or in a barn. So there are different ways to go about that. If you want to do it 100% organic, you're going to have to probably keep those babies penned up and only eating hay, like lifted hay, feeders, nothing on the ground where they're not ingesting them. You can look at a baby and tell if it has been exposed to coccidia at a young age. It just doesn't thrive, it doesn't grow. It's gonna have a tinier face, tinier boning. Everything's just gonna look smaller as opposed to a big, healthy, growing baby. And it's here, the culprit is normally coccidia. And it can even kill them. If you see babies with diarrhea or scours, that is a telltale sign that they've ingested coccidia and they're struggling with coccidiosis. And that is going to be something that you will have to treat, most likely chemically. There are natural things you can do, but at that point, if they're already scouring, you want to make sure that you are getting fluids in them, that they're not dehydrated, and get them patched up. So when you are breeding, you're either obviously going to own a buck, or you're going to, if you have a friend, that's even better. You can just borrow their buck, and then you don't have that stinky thing on your property. Goat bucks are disgusting, okay? They are disgusting, and a lot of them are sweet, and they want to share that disgustingness with you. So they will pee on your face. If you don't know that, that's like their perfume of choice. The goats will pee on their face and then go over to the female goats and wag their tongue in their face. It's extremely romantic. And not something that I like to deal with, but it's a necessary evil. We actually just picked up a little Nigerian buck this weekend, and I hadn't smelled that smell in a very long time. You can smell him down the road, like driving up down the road. We were laughing about it. It's a very humid day, and my husband said, I smelled him coming home. Hopefully he gets his job done quickly and we can send him on his way. I used to keep a buck pasture at a different location, where I lived in a different location, and their pasture was way off to the side where no one had to interact with them, smell them, and when they're not in rut, they don't smell as bad. But obviously they ramp up in the breeding season. So you can choose to breed a purebred animal, you can get a registered animal, an unregistered animal. You can cross them if you are trying to get a different milk consistency or taste. You can cross them based on that. So like I mentioned, you have a Sonnet and an Alpine right now. You just got a Nigerian, so a smaller buck, higher cream content. I would like some cream content in the milk, and I would like the babies to be smaller. If I end up keeping any, I'm hoping to keep the high productivity of the larger goats and the size of the smaller goats, and feed less and have higher cream content. So that's where you get a lot of the minis, when they cross Nigerians with the bigger breeds. And you will know that because, like with the Nubians that have the long ears, when you cross them, they normally have what they call airplane ears, where they just stick straight out. Drives me crazy. But you can normally get some really pretty patterns with them if you are someone who likes spotted goats or blue eyes or things like that. You're gonna wanna go with the Nigerian. They're a lot more flashy. So we will see what we get out of them, but I believe it is 52 days. The breeds are different. They're off by a couple days with gestation. It's 52 days, or 552 days rather. So about 5 months. You're aiming, like I said, for January, February kidding, and you're gonna wanna get a kidding kit put together, okay? And I will try to make a list of the things that you wanna put in that kidding kit, but you're gonna want things like towels or scissors and iodine for the umbilical cords if that's something that you are going to be doing and not just leaving to the mother. You're going to want vitamin D, syringes, maybe some minerals and zinc, probiotics for after the birth. These are all things that you can choose to do just to help them succeed and thrive. All of them aren't always necessary if you have a more hands-off approach. That's gonna depend on the goat, it's gonna depend on the health of the goat, and how you wanna run your herd. But in my experience, I haven't had to pull any goats, but I've had a lot of people that have, that I know that have had to deal with ones that have gotten stuck or had strange things at birth. Now, I have had babies that needed the vitamin B complex at birth, or the selenium. If they have wobbly legs, you're gonna need selenium. And these are all things that you don't have to know immediately, but that you can learn leading up to the birth. And they have a lot of Facebook groups where people are willing to help teach or answer questions or things like that. It doesn't have to be a scary process. Because on the flip side of that, there are people that just have them and let them birth, and they do fine, and that's great. I just like to be prepared for whatever is coming, and giving them a chance at success. Okay, so when you have kids, you're also going to have to make the choice of whether you want to disbud or not. So disbudding is making the choice to burn the horn buds before they start to grow, if you do not want a horned animal. If you want to go all natural and you let them keep their horns, that's fine, but there are pros and cons. I honestly don't see any pros except just not messing with it or letting them be natural, like let the goat be the goat. But in our situations, that's how you get a lot of broken necks. They'll stick their heads through fences and get stuck. They'll break their neck, and you find a goat, a dead goat when you come out. For an ornery goat, or especially a buck, and you leave horns on it, you might really get those weaponized against you, which is not fun at all. And then if you have one that has horns and one that does not have horns, obviously one with horns has a greater advantage in the pasture, and it can hurt the others also. Resale value, people don't want goats with horns. It's just not something, I know people will just pass them up normally and go, sorry, I don't want horns, for all of those reasons. So if you have one horned goat in your herd, you're most likely going to want all of your goats to have horns and keep horns, and just know that you might have an issue reselling them later. But for me, I think it's definitely, I don't want broken necks. I've seen far too many get their heads stuck in fences or gates that, even without horns, and you're like, how on earth did you do this? How? And it's like a puzzle trying to maneuver them in the right way to get them back out. There's a joke with goats and also with sheep as they wake up in the morning and think, how can I kill myself today? Okay, what creative way can I kill myself? It's a split tree, let me stick my leg in there and break it. So I always look at every situation in a pasture as kind of like a final destination. You remember that movie? I look at everything like a death trap. How can you kill yourself in here? Let's try to prevent that first. Okay, so raising the kids, I mentioned earlier you can decide between letting them dame raise or bottle raising. So the benefits of dame raising is if you are not able to get to that goat to milk her immediately, the kids are gonna be on her. If she only has one baby, you're gonna have to milk her no matter what. You're gonna have to stay on the schedule. If she has twins or triplets, they may still not be able to milk her out, especially in those early days. So it's not like a cow where, later on you can just let them be. I find it's more intensive when you have these bigger producers. If you have a goat that's not a big producer, then you might not have an issue, okay? And with milking, it's supply and demand. So the more you're milking, and like we said, the more you're feeding high protein like alfalfa, the more milk you're going to get. I personally, when I had them before, I pulled them all and bottle raised them. And as much as I hated taking them from their mothers, it was a way that I could keep them healthy. It's the way I could bond with them. A bottle-fed goat is much easier to milk later, and they always follow you around and look to you as mom, to you for food and whatever else. And it can be quite the rodeo with a goat if they haven't been bottle raised or haven't been handled at all. Now you can dame raise and handle the babies, and they can still be, they can still be fine. It just depends on what kind of bond you created with them. But for the other reasons, like we said with the udders, if you are showing, or if you need those udders to stay nice, you don't want to risk them getting uneven or their teeth being blown out either. Another thing that people do, especially when they have several goats that they're breeding, is when they pull them, they'll put them on the bottle and they'll sell them as bottle babies. And then that means you don't have, 5, 12 babies that you're raising and trying to maintenance and keep parasite free in those early developmental years. I find that that's really difficult to maintain each and every one of them. Okay. So milk stands. When you are training a goat to a milk stand, first of all, you can choose different types of milk stands. There's metals, there's wood. Some people, well, Dee Dee, we're able to just clip her collar to the cattle panel and just milk her on the ground by her feeder. But normally, especially if you're the one training the goat, you're gonna wanna start feeding them on the milk stand to where they see that milk stand like a treat. Like, okay, great, I get something special up here. Some people do a sweet feed on the stand. I don't do any sweet feed or anything like that, but I do oats, you know, something special, or when they're regular meal time, so they just know, jump up there. And that way you're not dragging them, you're not hoisting them up there. They'll just run and jump up, and you keep that little head gate closed, and you go to milking. When you are getting them ready or training them while they're eating, you just want to touch their udder. Just at first, just get comfortable, or let them get comfortable with your hand being there. Then you can kind of mimic the milking motion, and most of them, especially like I said, if they're bottle raised, they're not going to care. Let's go with these milking buckets, and we'll talk about this right after we do this, because we were going to do this in the beginning, and it's just sitting here not cold anymore, so I completely forgot about it. So why don't we, what's the easiest way? Someone want to pass out, or I can just pass them down? Okay, we'll do that. So this is called a recap, and it fits on mason jars. There's different sizes, and it's so handy. You just have this little flip top. Yeah. Okay, they're just gonna pour this and pass it around, and I'm just gonna go over some of the milking supplies and what we do. So when they're on the milk stand or clipped up and eating, we will go ahead and spray and wash the teats first. I should come over here with this on my thing. Oh, it's okay. I'll just turn this over here. So this is just a regular spray bottle. You can get them anywhere. It doesn't matter what the design is or the style. But I make my own teat wash. I just use essential oils and castile soap, lavender, tea tree, and castile soap and water. And we go ahead and we spray the udder with this. We use paper towels so that they're disposable. You can use rags, but then you're going to be doing a lot of washing. You don't want to keep reusing that rag. You want a clean udder so that there's no bacteria going in your milk or bacteria going back up in the teat and causing mastitis. So after we spray and wash, we will go ahead and do 3 squirts out of each teat just to clear those teats out. And if there is any bacteria there, we're going to just squirt it right into the paper towel and throw that. You can use any food grade bucket. We use stainless steel. It's easy to wash. There's different sizes. When lactation is low, we can use a small one. When it's high, use a big one, really simple. I know some people that just use plastic 5-gallon buckets, and as long as they're clean, you don't have an issue with that at all. So we put that on the stand under the goat, and we milk into that bucket. And some people actually have like a screen that goes over top to prevent hair or other things, from going into the bucket. If you shave your udders, you will have a lot less hair that falls in. Hair's not normally an issue. With my goats, they don't have very hairy udders, but some do. I did have to shave a lot of my hands before. And if you have a clean animal that isn't laying in the mud, or you have already washed them, dirt isn't going to be a huge concern either. But it's going to be fine. When we get in the house, we're going to use a filter. And this is a small filter. For a cow or a large amount of milk, they have them, they're about this much bigger. And we just go ahead and take this bottom piece off. Okay. And in there, you can use cheesecloth, but we have these neat little filters. I find these are neat. They're just disposable, and then I don't have smelly milk cheesecloth laying around the house and in the laundry. So just put this in here, throw it back on. mason jar and just start pouring your milk. And it goes through. Anything that is potentially in there is out, and you want to get that milk chilled as fast as possible. This is going to affect flavor as well. If you let milk sit out in the heat and it's not chilled quickly, it will start to age faster. And so then you're going to get that goatier flavor faster than you would if it was put on ice. Every goat is different with the flavor and the aging also. I had a Nubian that didn't develop flavor at all for up to 2 weeks. I've had some that it comes out goaty, like I said, and I don't prefer the taste. Some have 3 days, some have 5 days. So it's just going to be whatever your goat, what the breeding is, or what its environment is like. So again, make sure you ask questions and you taste before you buy. So likewise, with the teat sprays, we make a fly spray too, and it's essential oils as well. I'll put that recipe in there. If you are showing, like I said, you'll pull the babies. You want to make sure that the udders are staying nice. You're going to want to buy from a show breeder so that the udder is picture perfect and not just working. Because there are 2 types of goats, just like in anything else. You can have a great milker that maybe doesn't have a pretty udder that wouldn't do well in a show ring, but she's still a great Homestead milker. So don't discount those, but know whatever your goal is with the goat when you're buying them. 4-H is a good one to find goats and to show in. They have, Louisiana had a juniors, I forget what it was called, because it was years ago. My daughter showed in it once, and they had a whole showing for juniors, aside from 4-H. And then they have the ADGA, which is the American Dairy Goat Association, where they have their standard shows, and that's their registry and all of that. You can find breeders on Facebook. You can go to that website, and I think they have a breeders list there on ADGA. So once you choose or narrow down to what breed you want, you know, it's easier that way to find a breeder on the website. And I personally will recommend that if you, again, it depends on your situation, how many acres you have, where your goats will be living, how they're contained, what's surrounding you. I love to run guard dogs with them. I have never lost anything to a predator because I keep guardian dogs. And they're not for everyone. They're not Labradors, but they have been amazing for us. I've had Pyrenees, and now I have 3 Pyrenees Anatolian crosses. They raise the babies. They protect them, they play with them, and to me, they are worth their weight in gold. I love them. I had a bunch of pictures I was going to show you of them, so those will be in there. And if you have any questions about those, I can answer guard dog questions later if you want to contact me. So I think that's about it. Does anyone want to comment on the milk?
Who didn't get milk? Y'all right there? You get milk? Just y'all.
Did you try some?
Carrie's gonna try some in a minute.
Wait, you said you have had raw milk
I've had it
before?
before, and you know,
And it's delicious,
I
right?
actually thought you might have pasteurized it because it tasted
No.
so, like, I don't know, not
It's
good.
good, right? It's
Very
sweet.
good.
It is sweet. So
What
this is
kind of
coming
goat
from
is this?
Vanessa, okay? Very bougie name for the goat that we bought recently. She came with that name, and we considered changing it, but she knows it. She knows it, she comes to it, so Vanessa it is. And she's the Alpine.
Okay.
And that was my first Alpine goat, and I'd never even tasted the milk from them, but I really do like it. I prefer it. I would, like I said, like a little more cream content, so I'm hoping the babies are phenomenal with that Nigerian milk crossed in, but we shall see.
I may have missed this at the beginning. Are you accepting questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome. I've heard that goats are pretty susceptible to tuberculosis. Do you like vaccinate them? Have you heard of that?
I don't vaccinate. A lot of people do. They'll do tetanus. They'll do. There are several that you can just
Oh, no,
look
it's
up.
tetanus. I'm sorry, not tuberculosis.
Okay.
It's tetanus, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can just go ahead and look up a goat kitten schedule. Tractor Supply sells the vaccines. It's really easy. When you own goats, you're going to learn to be your own vet very quickly because it would be insanely expensive to do all the maintenance on a herd of goats if you were taking each one to the vet.
Okay, but you personally don't? And, like,
I don't, I did in the past,
Okay.
I haven't recently. I've tried to go a more natural route, and I haven't had experience with that. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but that's just gonna be a choice that you'll make for your group.
Awesome.
Mhm. Anything else?
How much of a,
Oh,
you're good.
So you said like moisture, like water, dew, that's bad for parasites. What about if they were grazing around a pond?
Liver flukes would be an issue possibly. We do have a pond, our goats aren't in the back by it. I hate to treat something delicate on a homestead, but if anything is delicate, it's gonna be goats. I make sure they have clean, fresh water. I actually like the small, automatic waters that you can put in the stall, as opposed to even having a trough with an automatic water for the goats. I don't think a trough is bad. I'm just, if they're gonna put feet in it, or if it's not tall enough, the small ones are really the way to go if you have a stall, if you're able to do that. Yeah, it's kind of like the heat and the moisture, just a terrible combination for the parasite load here. I've actually been loving this drought, and I know most people aren't, and, you know, we have to water our gardens and things, and my animals are really healthy right now. I can't complain. Did you?
How, do you just free feed them a ration, or is that what they get fed when you milk them?
That is what they get fed when I milk them. But everyone else who's not milking is gonna get fed, you know, you can choose to feed once a day or twice a day. Hay should be free feed. They should always have a full hay feeder, and if they're milking, they can even have a full alfalfa feeder if you are feeding the loose alfalfa. They also love peanut hay. I don't have a contact for that, but I've heard a lot of people talk about peanut hay that they're really fond of.
How do you know how much ration that they need?
There is an equation. I am not one with numbers, so we're giving Vanessa about 3 pounds a day. Like if you're milking, Tractor Supply has those scoops that estimate, you know, how many pounds that you're giving. And when I got that, I actually was surprised and thought, wow, I think I was overfeeding for quite a while, thinking that the big green scoops were like 1 pound. In reality, they're like, so if they're thin, pack it on. Some animals put more of their body weight into their milk, or they just like keep producing heavily, and they're just thin. And so anything you can give them is gonna help, but it's also gonna have them milk more. So it's just this cycle of giving. And if you are gonna breed, then you're gonna wanna dry them up and try to get the weight back on them, you know, before you breed.
How often do you milk them per day?
So when they first kid, you're gonna milk twice a day. You're gonna need to milk twice a day because it comes in so full. And as the lactation cycle goes on, they will start to produce less and less. And so we're on a once a day milk right now. And then if we're gonna try to dry her up, then we're gonna go every other day. And taper off to the end, but you wanna be very careful when you're doing that, that you're watching them, they're not getting mastitis.
What are some signs of mastitis?
Heat. Okay, so when you touch the udder, it's gonna normally be hot. Redness can develop when it's already getting bad, but you won't always have that at first. If you have salty milk, it's starting to happen, and you can clip it right then, hopefully, and never let it advance to the painful state. When it gets painful and it goes unchecked, it will develop clumps, blood. It's extremely painful. They'll kick. They don't want you to milk them out, but you have to milk them out. If they have that issue, no matter how painful it is for the goat, I mean, I've only experienced it once, but it was pretty bad. We were able to get rid of it though with just essential oils, and we didn't have to do anything chemically, but it's not always the case. And so you can do a rub after you milk. I didn't even say that we wash, but you can do like a lotion and oil rub after that can just keep it clean, keep it flowing. You can even put oils in there that will increase the milk. There are supplements, herbs, and different things that you can do to increase milk. But just keeping it cleaned out, keeping them milked out, making sure they don't sit, that they're not laying in manure, things like that, that's gonna help. And some of them are just prone to it. So if you get one that has developed it several times, you're gonna always wanna watch it. You may not wanna keep her. She may be a cult. Maybe like a reoccurring problematic thing for you. average is 500, but that's gonna differ by state, it's gonna differ by breed, it's gonna differ mainly by quality, okay? Don't buy a cheap goat. That is one thing that you do not wanna do. Just like I said, when you can't rehab a goat, I'm not saying you can't, you don't want to. You really don't want to, especially if you're a beginner. So some of them, Erin, what's the, is it 1,200 that wait list is right now? For 700? 800. Okay, so that's for a goat that is in milk. A doe in milk and alpine, the wait list is 800 at a good show, from a good show herd. It's just gonna differ. How well are they doing in the show ring? How many, do they have? What are they putting into it? What are they asking for it? Some people can just name the price. So, or if, how prevalent is the breed? You're gonna find Nigerians around here a dime a dozen. They're everywhere, whether they were shown or not, tested or not, because those little ones, people are not intimidated by them, they just let them reproduce in the back. And I will say the Nigerians are the hardiest. They do well with the least amount of intervention. Nubians really look for ways to die. They do. Parasites are rough with Nubians, I'm gonna be honest. But I prefer bigger ones. Any other questions? You wanna- oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I have 2 Nigerians that are due
Yeah.
any day. And I haven't quite decided if I'm gonna pull the babies or not, but if I don't, I can still milk once a day. You think that's enough to keep away the mastitis? Okay.
Especially right after, you're gonna wanna milk it, just in the beginning. And it's gonna depend also on how big of a producer she is. Because all of them are different. You wanna keep it comfortable, don't want to get mastitis, and you wanna make sure that they get that colostrum, whether you pull or not, that's going in the bottle. If you're gonna pull, do it immediately. It's heartbreaking either way, so if you're gonna do it immediately before they start calling for them. I think that's the kindest way. You wanna do like a panel, pros and cons, cow versus goat?
Well, if anybody wants to do that, because lots of people ask, like, what are the differences between goats and cows? Should I get a goat? Should I get a cow? So if y'all are interested in that, we can talk about that while y'all are here. I think some people wanted to talk about that at the cow class that I did in July, but we hadn't really talked about goats yet, so I felt like if we started doing that, then we'd have a whole class on goats right then and there.
Right.
So if anybody wants to do pros and cons, cows versus goats, we can do that.
I have one question.
Okay.
About, in your goat barns or sheds, do you recommend concrete floor or dirt floor, or what do you generally keep on the?
I've always had dirt, but it's up to you, what you wanna have. Concrete would obviously be really easy to hose off. I don't know if it's comfortable. I've always actually done sawdust, like dirt and then sawdust. I like the Tractor Supply pellet that you wet and it puffs up. That's always done really well for me. You can use straw. It's just whatever's easiest to compost will stay dry. If you need to clean things out, you can do it. But either one works. Goats do like things. The dairy ones especially are divas. And if you have a pile of hay somewhere or a round bale that is like fallen, that is not a throne. So if you have concrete, you better have a throne.
I may have missed it. Is there a particular routine for deworming in our area that's better than others that you might not find online?
You don't want to do it in a routine because that's how
Okay.
you're going to build up resistance. For a while, people are like, okay, do it every other month or do it every 6 months, or rotate these 3 wormers. Well, now you've got parasites that are used to 3 wormers and are going to start developing a resistance to that. So that's why we check the FEMACHA. The only worm is needed, but the herbal wormers we do all the time.
Like pumpkin and
No, I
other
mean
things?
like a specific blend of herbs.
Oh, okay.
So Motley's Herbals is a 2-part system. It has a 1 and a 2. So the first one has wormwood in it. Make sure you never use that while they're pregnant. You never want to use the number 1 while they're pregnant because it can cause a miscarriage. But normally you would do that for 3 days, and then once a week, on one day, you give the number 2. So that's their system. And it has different ingredients. This new one that I said that I ordered in that I'm gonna try, it's only a 1 part. I can let you know what the schedule is on that. But definitely don't just worm to worm, or preventatively. You don't ever want to preventatively worm. I was just saying it like a panel, like ask whoever, you know, pros versus cons. Do you want to share this one? Oh, okay.
Okay, wait, so butter, do you make butter with your goat milk?
I have before, but it takes a lot more.
Right.
The goats we have right now don't have a high cream content. So the Nigerians, it would be a lot easier to do with, and I think it's still not gonna be, can't hold a flame to a Jersey.
Right.
And it will taste whatever like your milk tastes like. It might have a little goaty flavor, but if your milk doesn't, it may not too.
What are the things you cannot do with goat milk that you can do with cow milk?
Can't or prefer? Those are gonna be 2 different things, like butter.
Yeah.
I'm not a big cook. I have to say that, like, I plan to take a class on what I can do more with the milk, with the cultures, but I make yogurt, I make cheese, but just those are the basic. Oh, cajeta, you can do with goat milk, that's a Mexican caramel. Aaron and I have been making the goat milk caramels. You know, you're gonna add sugar and things to that, but the cajeta is just cooked down goat milk, and it's almost like a sauce, like a caramel sauce. I don't know cheeses. I'm not I make a basic
So
farm
can you
cheese.
make hard cheeses with goat milk or just soft cheeses?
Like
Cheddars, Parmesan.
I don't think so.
So it's probably gonna be just the soft cheeses, and then also, what I would think would be the biggest, like, what can you do with it, what you can't, is the quantity is gonna matter the most, because even with me milking 2 cows at a time, I still don't have enough to make all the cheese that I wanna make. My cows aren't huge producers. I know people that get 6 or 7 gallons a day and they milk twice a day, and they have enough to make cheddar and Gouda and all that stuff. So then with a goat, I mean, that's out of the question.
If you have a herd, a lot of
If you
them
have a
do.
herd, yeah.
You know, people who are raising goats sometimes they have a machine, but they're milking, I think, 10, 15, and you know, they'll kind of go through the line with them. I was milking 7 by hand at one point. Insane.
And then, what about ice cream?
Very good.
Yeah.
Goat milk ice cream is delicious.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, the 2 biggest things that stick out to me are, how much land you have, cow versus goat, and then how much, what's in the budget, because the cows are so much more expensive. Me? The cop is calling me.
Time out. I can speak to that though. So having had both, the goats, like I said, can do well in a small area. They don't have to have a lot of land if you're dry lotting them or whatever.
Gotcha.
Okay. Are you going? Oh, okay, sorry, I thought you had something.
I'm in trouble because I don't have my shoes on.
Oh,
They
okay.
like us to wear shoes in the library.
Sorry.
Is that all it was? Yeah, I got fussed at last month.
Sorry.
You can't invite homesteaders to the library and expect us to act right. You can go ahead and finish what you were saying.
What was I saying? Land and cost, yeah. Dairy cows are just very expensive, and, not just to buy the cow, but like, if you gotta go to the vet, the livestock trailer, the fencing for the huge pasture that you have to have, the hay over the winter, it just costs a lot more money.
I feel like feed is more complex and it may cost more if you have several, or as much if you have several.
Several goats.
Mhm. But if it's a one-on-one, you don't wanna have just one goat either though. You at least wanna have two. You know, they're herd animals and they will either be really depressed or they will stand at the gate and yell for you, if they don't have someone to be with. But as far as cost, I would say cost and vet work, because, we lost a cow this spring that I called over 12 vets when she went down.
Yes.
12.
We do not have vets here that wanna deal with cows, that's a huge problem.
There's nothing I could do for her. We tried to make harnesses, we tried the tractor, we tried, multiple friends coming over and enrolling her several times. It was very helpless, and for me, I prefer a goat that I can pick up, or, you know, at least two people can pick up or do something with when there's a problem. It feels a lot more, I don't feel helpless, you know, I don't feel like if there's something going on, that there's just nothing I can do about it in that situation.
Are cows less likely to be divas?
To be what?
Divas. She kept referring to some as divas.
I feel like dairy is diva.
Dairy is diva.
I'm a dairy person.
Yeah.
Meat.
Yeah.
Anything dairy is gonna be a diva within that realm.
Are they okay being by themselves?
No.
Pretty much like either one, you need at least two.
Yeah, I moved my cow a few weeks ago into this amazing pasture that hasn't been touched in over a year. The grass was long, and I put her in there by herself and walked away, and she was just yelling at me, and she was so mad. And went home and just watched her through the window for a few hours, and she just stood there like mooing at me at the house. And then finally, I was like, okay. I went and got her a friend and brought her in the pasture, and they were fine. So, yeah, they like friends.
With goats, can you have different breeds to create a little group, or does it all need to be the
Oh,
same
yeah.
breed?
My front yard, I call it the Motley Crew. I have two summer lambs that were, they're separated so that I can feed them. They're not supposed to be born in the summer, so I feed them separately. And then I have the Alpine and I have the Sonnet, and now we have this little Nigerian buck. So it's different from what I had before, where I had all of these registered show quality Nubians, whereas now we're just looking for milk. You know, you can combine whatever you wanna combine as long as they get along. Now, if you have two herd queens, they call them, which are the bosses, they're gonna have to settle that out, and if they don't, it might be ongoing, as long as no one's hurting each other, as long as one isn't horned and the other one isn't, or you have a situation like that, they should be fine, they'll work it out.
Do they get along with sheep?
Mine do. The goats are still the bosses, for sure, at least these breeds are. But they all lay together, they don't, you can tell they don't accept them as their own. Like, they can be in the same area and coexist, but there's no mistaking that the goat thinks the sheep is a goat. There's a line.
Are they smarter than sheep?
Yes. Yes. When I got sheep last year, immediately I was like, I get it now. I get why the insult is being called a sheep. And, you know, I understood so many more scriptures also.
What about dangers of parasites with a cow? Because I know we talked about that a lot with the goats.
I would say probably not as susceptible.
Okay. Or other disease type.
I mean, there are diseases, there's problems.
Yeah.
Any dairy is gonna have problems, but I would say goats are more finicky. Just don't get a cheap cow, and don't get a cheap goat.
Yeah.
And you'll be okay.
Don't do cheap dairy.
Yeah.
But the goats are much more susceptible to parasites. It's a higher maintenance. I wouldn't be worried unless it's just like, you know, yearly watching or maintenance. Not yearly, you'd watch them all the time. But the goats you have to watch all the time because they can go like overnight. Like, hey, her eyes were pink yesterday and now they're ghost white. I think she's gonna die. But that's if you haven't been watching and you haven't been pasture rotating or taking care of one that may be susceptible in that way.
I don't vaccinate or deworm at all. Well, that's not true. I did it once, I think, in 7 or 8 years since I've had dairy cows. It doesn't mean my herd couldn't drop dead tomorrow, but they're all fine and healthy enough from that. But somebody did say something about meat, and I just want to point that out too, as the whole pros and cons thing. You're gonna just get so much more meat from the cow that has the baby. You get to eat the baby once it's full grown. so, you know, there's that. I mean, you can also do the goats babies, but
And we do, but you breed to a beef bull.
most of the time,
So that gives a little bit more
Yeah.
meat, right? With the goat babies, you know, sometimes they have twins, triplets, quads sometimes. Growing up, I always had to tell my daughter, don't get attached if it's a boy. If it doesn't sell, that's going in the freezer. Some people don't prefer the taste of goat. I think it's delicious. You're gonna want to castrate if you're going to raise them out and, you know, to a larger size, to process later, because you don't want that taint from them, once they reach maturity. But goat on the grill with some rosemary, great.
really good. Is anybody thinking goat versus cow? Is anybody kind of confused about that? Anyone here? You a little bit?
What about chickens intermingling with cow versus goat?
It's fine. For me, it's fine.
With the goat, I wouldn't do it with babies because of the coccidium. But once they're big, they're fine. And if they have somewhere, like I said, raised hay or browse, the goats don't want to graze. They will only graze if that's all they're given. So yeah, you don't want them grazing on short grass that's been pooped on by a chicken. It's not great, but it can be done if done with care.
And you have electric fencing for your goats too? So can I weave that through like a tree
Yeah.
line?
Oh yeah, ours looked like a game of Tetris at our house for a while, and we've just kind of opened things up a bit. But if you even just wanna do small sections and, kind of leapfrog them so that they're on a fresh piece all the time, that's excellent. It's higher maintenance, but to keep them off of certain areas for a while is best practice. If they're having to graze, if they don't have browse.
So I personally hate electric fencing, like, with all my heart and soul. She doesn't mind it, right? Is that true?
It's annoying, but I like the versatility of it. Like, I like to have an outside perimeter and then be able to do what I need to do with the electric fencing. But right now, one side of my front yard is purely electric, but that's just because we're not set up yet.
Yeah, it's a great option before you have permanent fencing. I definitely have a lot of electric fencing. I just can't stand it.
I hate moving them, I do.
Is the electric fencing also good for keeping coyotes out?
Yes.
Okay, so it could be a permanent thing? Give a lot of
At
advice.
this point, mine's pretty much a permanent thing,
Okay.
yeah. You have to make sure you have a backup charger, because that would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Cause they will test it, and when they figure out it's not on,
After storms, if the charger gets blown down, you have to weed eat under it. You have to make sure no limbs fall on it. I mean, it's a, like, constant.
And then another quick question, you said browse multiple times, and I know you kind of explained it, was like a tree line, right?
right, so browse are bushes, trees, anything shrubbery, okay?
I had heard that goats will kill trees, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, yeah. You don't wanna put them in a fruit orchard. No, they will
Okay.
eat everything. They will
So like
climb
a-
that tree,
like
they'll break their
healthy
leg in that
goats
tree.
Are good, right?
Oh, yeah.
Cows
They'll
will
try-
kill that.
They'll try to eat the
Cows will.
bark.
Yeah, cows
So
will
that's,
rub.
we've got a wooded area, and we were thinking about putting the goats in that area.
Oh, that would be fabulous.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
But you definitely wanna look for forks, like low-lying forks, in a tree.
Oh, okay,
Perfect leg trap.
okay.
So if you don't have a climber, it's fine, but if you have one that particularly does that, I would just put a board or something, you know, to block it
Thank you.
preventatively.
Thanks for explaining that.
There was something else with fences. Oh, so we have a solar box to energize our fence, and then we have a backup plug-in. That's what I prefer, so that if you need to move it somewhere where you're not close to an outlet, you can. But if something goes out with that, or, I mean, it's been fine even with stormy days, but, there's always a backup.
So we actually bought some neighboring property where we ran on the stormy goats. We were actually kind of thinking of having them kind of start to clear
Yeah.
before we go in there with like an excavator and everything. Is that a good idea? Other than the forks?
Yeah. Work smarter, not harder. They will love that. Turn your browse into milk and meat. I would just, like I said, be careful, walk through it if you have, if there's small saplings that'll bend, you're not gonna have a problem. It's if you have a fork.
There's some mature ones in there.
Okay. I mean, they'll find them, but you can't go cutting everyone down. I'd still do it.
What about with us being in such a hurricane-prone area, like as far as preparing animals for hurricanes, like cows versus goats? Like what do you do to prepare for hurricanes? And obviously it'd be easier to put some goats in a trailer and roll out.
Yes.
But do you ride them out with the animals? What do you do in those
I think
situations?
it would depend on what the category is, what your place looks like. I don't have a barn right now, but they'll say that in a hurricane, it's better to leave them out because if something's gonna collapse, you know, they're in there, they're done.
Yeah.
Goats hate rain. They hate rain and hate puddles. They will avoid water they will do anything to avoid water. It's actually really funny. So if corrective action needs to be taken, sometimes a spray bottle is really good to get them down or something. But I do try to make sure that there's somewhere they can go to get out of the rain, or there's a windbreak, but that they could still leave if they wanted. I wouldn't lock them up, you know, or anything.
If it were gonna be like a category 5, it was coming straight for us. I would probably load up my cow that was currently in milk and take off, along with some chickens that are producing and a few other things, just so that when I get back, everything's gone. At least we have
Best of luck to
something.
everybody else.
Yeah, right. But we've left for hurricanes before and just leave them out in the most secured perimeter
Fence.
type fence. Yeah, the one that we think is gonna stay up, but also, I mean, you fence my house, we don't leave them behind my house, we leave them on our other property that has a tree line, cause they'll go
Yeah.
hide in that tree line. Yes.
Okay.
So, and everybody's been fine so far, but we haven't had something really terrible yet.
Yeah.
So this isn't hurricane related, but it's pipeline related. And when we went to Pennsylvania, we loaded everyone into our horse trailer and traveled with them. And we found 2 farms in Pennsylvania. We found Trepagnier, which is also what it's really great for, camping with farm animals. It was chaos, but loaded everyone up in it. We had 3 goats at that time. One of our goats gave birth to triplets while we were there. And we used the horse trailer as their shelter, and we put the electric fencing around it. We plugged up our camper, and it was a portable farm. And it worked really well, and I think for that application especially, the goats are easier to maneuver and take them along.
Is there a major difference in what you can do with the milk from each one? Like, are there things you can't do with goat's milk that you can do with cow's milk?
May have been out when
Oh,
we were-
that was
it's
probably,
okay.
sorry.
It's
I
probably
probably
just
worked out.
cheeses, I think we kind of boiled it down to.
The
And it's a
goat-
different taste.
The goat milk is naturally homogenized, right? So it doesn't
Yeah.
separate
Good
like
point.
the.
Good point. So if you're gonna just want cream, you need to get a cream separator versus just sitting, oh, but I wish I had that picture. Sweetie, that goat I was telling you about had so much cream, and hers did settle after days. It will come to the top, and in a mason jar, it was almost like a cow. She was the best one. So they're all different. I just keep saying that, but they're all different. I can tell you the generalizations, but it's kind of a toss up of what you're gonna get.
Is butter from goats as good as butter from cows?
Not to me personally. I don't think there's anything like butter from a Jersey.
Mark Simon's butter was fabulous.
So I know like the goats had the A2, and I mean the cows, is it similar for goat or?
They are all, I believe, A2. It's the closest to breast milk you can get, which is why they raise babies on goat milk. So it's actually very good for you. And a lot of people that can't tolerate cow's milk, even A2 can tolerate goat's milk. Like, I can't do cow's milk very well, neither can soap, even when it's raw. Can do it, but I have, more side effects than if I'm gonna use goat's milk. And I've had people that couldn't touch, especially from the store, because it was pasteurized, couldn't touch any of that. And when they switched to goats, raw goats, they were absolutely fine.
Would you say, it would be a good idea to taste the cow's milk before you, the goat's milk before you buy it? You already told them that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Big time, because different breed, different environment.
Yeah. I cannot handle the taste of goat's milk except for that, because that is very close to cow's milk, but
I was nervous trying it because I've tried other goat's milk that was not
I know.
that good.
It does it such a disservice. I don't know how many people are like, oh, I just can't do that. And I'm like, just come over.
But
Mhm.
it does age though.
Because I can't.
You've gotten it, and I can drink it the first week. After that, it's too goaty for me.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. It tastes like I'm licking a goat. I'm not drinking
yes,
it.
once you know the way a male goat smells, that
Kind
ruins
of
me.
scarred for life. Yeah.
I can't eat goat cheese because of it now. I love goat cheese, but my kids love it.
So can that change from place to place? Like if you try it somewhere and then you bring it to your property and feed it differently, will that milk flavor change? Or you kind of like what you get's what you get?
It's normally what you get is what you get, unless you're not giving them feed that is changing, like if they have a lack of minerals.
Mhm.
Or kind of like the cow in the onion patch type deal. There might be something that they get into that makes it taste off, but I haven't experienced a lot of that at all.
Mm. Good to know.
Does the cow milk have the same variation that the goat milk does?
What do you mean, variation in
Flavor.
flavor?
Or it's gonna be the same all the time?
Some cow milk is more sweet than others. That's all I noticed.
Like you can tell whose milk it is.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't like get to a moment where you're like, ooh, cow.
It's how sweet it is. That's how I know which milk to get. Also, probably a pro
Look, do you want to see right here?
for goats. Takes a really long time to milk a cow. Probably doesn't take that long to
True.
milk a goat.
Very true. I prefer it. It goes quickly. And then, we didn't even talk about teat size. I talked about orifice size, but teat size, you want to make sure that when you are gripping that teat, that that's comfortable for your hands. Another reason I don't own Nigerians is because they have a smaller teat, but some of them have nice big ones that you can grasp, but a lot of them would be like this, and are not for it.
But cows are still like that. Right now I have a cow that I'm milking with these 3 fingers. But my hands they've gotten used to it and it's fine. It just takes a few weeks of intense pain. And then, yeah, okay.
They give a really great grip and,
Mm-hmm. Great forearms. As far as the difference in time, like half the time, a quarter of the time, in time to milk cows versus goats.
The one cow that I'm milking now, let's say she's giving me 1.5 gallons. She's a slow milker just because of the teat size, the pressure, everything. So she's a slow milker and it takes me probably 30 minutes, like the first week,
Focused.
the last week.
Mhm.
Yeah. But my other cow who made 1.5 gallons, I could milk her out probably in like 15 minutes or less, about maybe 10 if I had to go somewhere.
Yeah.
all of them are different on how much they're producing and then at what point in lactation you are. So right now, we're at the end of the 2-year lactation. So what are you getting, like a little over a quart a day? Okay. So a little over a quart, maybe, close to 1/2 gallon, and how long? I think about 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Yeah. But she has really good orifices. She's very easy to milk, very supple teeth.
I know the quantity of milk scares people with the cows. People say they want the cow for all these reasons, but they're scared to have so much milk. And they'll say, I don't even buy milk from the store. And I didn't either before I got the cow. And those first few months, I was like, oh my goodness, I was selling
Drowning.
so much milk. Yeah, and but then you just kind of get used to doing different things with it, and then you get used to just drinking it, and then it just becomes like the main
A staple.
Part of you?
yes. Then it's just like, how do I live without 5 gallons of milk a week to drink for myself? Well, not that much, but it's we drink a lot of milk, and I never needed milk before. So I just don't want people to be scared of having so much milk. Also, when you have so much milk, you can raise pigs on that, you can raise chickens on that, you can raise anything, any other animals on that. I mean, there are people who will get a dairy cow for their family, and then they'll have another one, so they're milking two, and the second one goes to all their animals, and they raise all their animals on milk, which is pretty amazing.
Or you can even soak the feed in it.
And soak the feed in it, yeah.
I'm not a big milk drinker, I mean, but like you were saying with the habit, we went years having to be dairy free in between when we had our herd before, we had to sell out completely, and then we just got goats back again. So I was completely out of the habit of drinking milk, and if I did, it was oat milk or coconut milk, from a can, and it's the least amount of fillers you can get. But Soap loves it, and I have noticed just because of the probiotic, content, she's different. She's drinking a lot, and when I got milk when she was younger, she would just chug it. If we went out of town and came back, it was almost like she was deprived of it, and her body would just need so much of it at that time. I think focus increases,
Yeah, my kids' personalities, when they're babies, when they're young, it changes. Well, it changed whenever we didn't have milk. I mean, they were just, it was like a completely different child. And then once they got back on milk again, it was different personality.
and we are definitely talking about raw milk.
Oh, yeah.
Just raw milk, because of everything that it has in it for the gut, the brain, development. I would find the opposite effect if I was trying to dump pasteurized milk into her. We had respiratory infections and skin issues.
How-
I don't know if you mentioned this, but I just wanted to remind everybody that there's so many good books here and at all the other branches of the libraries on keeping goats and things like that. So definitely check those out.
Can one versus the other last longer in the fridge and stay good?
14 days.
Well, after about a week and a half, I don't want to drink it. For me personally, with this goat.
Yeah.
So, like, the one Nubian we had, we were good for 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So it's,
Yeah, it's about 14-ish days that you can still drink it and it's fine. And then after that, I could still make yogurt with it. Yeah, but it does not sit that long.
Mm-hmm.
You just drink it.
Mm-hmm. Is there as much demand for people that are interested in selling it? Is there as much demand for goat's milk as there is raw cow's milk?
because a lot of women need it for their babies. A lot of people would come to me when they were going out of town, or when they were drying up, or with health issues, whether it's autism or different things.
I do think that that's a good point, though. I think, can you be profitable selling raw cow's milk, goat's milk, synthetically?
Like I said, with feed and stuff, I think they take a lot more than a cow, and a cow produces more. So if you had a really high producing goat, and she was an easy keeper, you might be okay.
Yeah.
But a gallon of cow's milk, $10, gallon of, how much feed?
Right now, I would sell it for like 17, and that's still within enough.
Okay, markets have changed, but back when cow was getting about 10 a gallon, I was getting 25. Because the supply of a goat is so different. So, a quart would be $5.
But having a plan to sell cow's milk and be profitable is a terrible plan. It's just not, I mean, it's just not gonna work.
Before anyone else files out, when I was making my slideshow, the very first page was about legalization in Louisiana, and there's a petition right now that I think they have like a week to go. So we can try to get that link sent out to everyone if you guys would like to go sign it. We've been fighting for years, and I think it was in like 2014 we got pretty far, and on the last step they shot it down. So
Are there any ways around the legal stuff, around some, are there ways to sell the milk legally?
Louisiana can do herd share,
Okay.
but you want to have contact, It's messy. Nobody's gonna come after you. Just don't put it on Facebook. Hey, what's up? Because I talked to the guy, I don't remember his name, he's our USDA, he's the person who comes after you. I talked to him on the phone about some things, and he was like, nobody cares. If y'all are selling our milk, just don't make it something that we have to,
Come deal with it.
you know.
Sell them a jar and sell it for free.
Yeah. I used to joke with, I was a high school teacher, I used to joke, I said, if you ever see my mugshot in the paper, it was just her, you know, selling milk out the back of my car. Any more questions? Is that about it? You good? Okay. Thanks for coming,
Thank you
guys.
so much. Perfect, thank you.
They're all done?
Yeah, I'm about to turn it off. Oh, I wonder when that stopped.
Oh, which one was
Right
it?
there.
The live one, probably. If that video stopped, I'm sorry. Thanks for
Hopefully.
joining us.
Talking about
Hi, Esther.